Crucial discussion on promoting better nutrition outcomes through a multi-sectoral approach in post-COVID Asia and Pacific. My name's Shuli Ghosh. I'm a reporter and a TV presenter, and I've been reporting on hunger and poverty in some of the world's poorest countries for some 30 years now. So it really is a topic that's very close to my heart. And right now we're at a critical juncture. This is the second year of the pandemic. We're still seeing outbreaks, but the focus is now turning to recovery and rebuilding. And one of the most crucial issues is how to tackle malnutrition, particularly in low and middle income countries. The pandemic has really highlighted, I think, the inadequacies of some of the current systems which are in place, and has had a hugely negative impact on progress towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals of zero hunger and better nutrition by 2030. And it's against this background that the Asian Development Bank and Nutrition International have come together in a meaningful partnership to further their joint ambition of promoting better social protection and nutrition security for some of the world's most vulnerable people. Let's take a quick look at the backgrounds of both these organizations. The Asian Development Bank has long been committed to achieving a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and Pacific, while sustaining its efforts to eradicate extreme poverty. It was established in 1966. It has 68 members, 49 of them which are in the region. And it assists its developing member countries by providing hundreds of billions worth of dollars of grants, loans, technical assistance, and investment to promote social and economic development across its 16 sectors and themes. It maximizes the development impact by facilitating policy dialogue, providing advisory services, and mobilizing financial resources through co-financing operations that tap official, commercial, and export credit sources. Nutrition International has been leading the fight against malnutrition for nearly 30 years now. It's a global organization. It's headquartered in Ottawa in Canada, but it works across more than 60 countries. It focuses on delivering low-cost, high-impact nutrition interventions to people in need. Working alongside governments as an expert ally, Nutrition International combines deep technical expertise with a flexible approach, increasing impact without increasing complexity or cost. For the first time, these two bodies have come together to join forces in the run-up to the Nutrition for Growth Summit. And it's an exciting partnership, and one that very much underlines the focus of today's discussion. That is the need for collective action and a multi-sectoral approach in dealing with social protection and nutrition needs. So during the course of today's discussion, we're going to hear from the ADB, from Nutrition International, but also experts and policymakers and stakeholders. We're going to get the picture on the ground from those involved in Indonesia, Mongolia, and the Philippines. And we're also going to take questions from you, the audience. And you're free to submit those questions at any point, starting from now, simply by typing them into the chat box, and we will get through as many of them as we possibly can. First, though, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Bambang Susantono is the Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development at the Asian Development Bank. He is distinguished in providing global thought leadership on sustainable development. He actively conducts research, has published several books, and writes articles on the subject of infrastructure, transportation, urban and regional planning, and climate change. He holds a PhD in infrastructure planning and 2 master's degrees in transportation engineering and city and regional planning from the University of California, Berkeley, plus a bachelor's degree in engineering from the Bandung Institute of Technology. Dr. Susantono is responsible for coordinating research on topics including energy, transport, water, education, health, finance, and digital technology, and cross-cutting themes such as climate change, gender equality, social development, rural development, and food security. Prior to this, he was the acting minister and vice minister of transportation in Indonesia and deputy minister for infrastructure and regional development. Also a board member for airline, port, telecommunication, and media companies. He's chaired several research institutes and taught in universities. it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Susantono.
Thank you very much to a very generous introduction, Shirley. A very good day to all of you and a very good afternoon from ADB headquarters at Manila, the Philippines, to our distinguished panelists, colleagues, and also guests. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this side event of the Tokyo Nutrition for Good Summit 2021. Our topic today is promoting better nutrition outcomes through multi-sectoral approach in a post-COVID-19 Asia and the Pacific. And I'm very glad to join forces with my colleague Joel Spicer from Nutrition International to co-organize this event along with many colleagues, longtime colleagues and friends. I do hope all of you stay well and also healthy. Our session today is timely and relevant. The risk of food and nutrition insecurity is rising. The UN estimates that the undernourished in Asia increased from 361.3 million people to 418 million between 2019 and 2020. However, the recovery from the pandemic offers the opportunity to create a more resilient and nutrition-smart food system in our region. The Asia and Pacific region is struggling with several types of malnutrition today, like stunting, wasting, micronutrient deficiencies, excessive weight, and obesity. All countries in the region suffer from one or more forms of malnutrition. Undernourishment in most countries is not improving, and in some cases, worsening. More than 2 billion adults worldwide are overweight and obese, conditions that increases the cardiovascular mortality rate by 4 times and doubles the cancer-related mortality rate. According to a global burden of disease study, 4.7 million people died prematurely in 2017 because of obesity. At the same time, the number of stunted, wasting, and overweight children remains too high, as you can see from the 2021 UNICEF statistic here. All these global problems are more pronounced in Asia and the Pacific. About 1 billion, or 2 of every 5 adults, are obese or overweight. The prevalence of stunting in Asia is 21.8%, which is higher than the global average of 21.3%. In Asia's prevalence of wasting is 9.1%, also higher than the global average of 6.9%. So about 1.9 billion people in Asia Pacific region cannot afford a healthy diet. As you can see on the slide, there is a positive correlation between stunting and the lack of access to a healthy diet. It is well known that stunting is associated with many negative consequences for the affected people. They are not limited to health, and some are long-term or even lifelong, such as lower school achievement and reduced productivity. It is clear that improving access to healthy diet must be priority in our resilient, inclusive, and sustainable development agenda. In many Asian countries, children aged 6 to 23 months do not have the minimum dietary diversity, minimum meal frequency, or minimum acceptable diet. Again, the highest rates of stunting and wasting are among the poor. This means we must close the gaps in access, affordability, and availability of nutritious foods. We also have to work on their nutritional knowledge, attitude, and practices. As we all know, in 2016, all UN members committed to use the following 10 years for sustained, coherent actions that will end malnutrition worldwide and ensure no one is left behind. At ADB, one of our main goals is to end hunger and malnutrition across our region. The pyramid outlines some of the solutions to malnutrition. One of the main reasons why a healthy diet is costly is the inability to prevent losses in quantity and quality of food. In developing Asia, a large amount of perishable and thus their nutritious value are lost as they are transported from field to market. So the first step to eliminate malnutrition is to prevent these losses. One of the main causes for these losses is the lack of proper agricultural logistics, like cold chains, refrigerated transport, and modern warehouse, among others. ADB will continue to work with our countries to help them build modern agriculture and market infrastructure. We are also working to boost nutrition by producing more vegetables and fruit to increase dietary diversity. Let me offer some specific example on how we are helping our members build nutritional security. In Mongolia, for example, ADB approved $73 million in March this year for a social welfare support program. This expands on an ongoing assistance program that provides universal cash grants to children who suffered nutritional risk due to the pandemic. The program also supports the government food stamp program for the poor. This initiative will protect about 85% of poor households from falling into the malnutrition trap. At the same time, we are working to help build the country's overall capacity to produce and to preserve more nutritious vegetables and to make them available to consumers at affordable prices. In the Philippines, we are also helping protect the poor from falling into the poverty and malnutrition traps, while supporting the long-term capacity of the agricultural sector to deliver a healthier diet. This program, approved in August 2020, will support the government's feeding program for undernourished children to reduce the high rates of child malnutrition and stunting. Poor pregnant women are also among the target beneficiaries of the nutritional food program. Importantly, the policy-based lending program is anchored in implementing key policies and institutional reform to increase agricultural productivity and better manage food stocks to cope with any emergency or shocks. In Indonesia, we are preparing a project that uses an integrated approach to increase productions of fruit and vegetable by bringing new lands under cultivations. It is designed to reduce post-harvest losses through investments in post-harvest storage, processing, packaging, logistic facilities, and farmer training. As part of this project, we are also proposing support to local governments in preparing regulations to better manage agriculture stocks and prices. What these projects and program examples tell us is that to tackle nutrition security effectively, we must recognize the cross-cutting nature of the issue. Just from these examples, it is clear that social protection, health, gender, education, water, agriculture, local governance, and many other angles must be integrated to maximize the impact of our interventions. This is why a multi-sectoral intervention is a must. We deal with this challenge in ADB Strategy 2030, which takes multi-sectoral approaches in all 7 operational priorities, including the one on promoting rural development and food security. This integrated approach also promotes collaborations between public, private sector, and also society, and building synergy between knowledge solutions and financing. Here at the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit 2021, let me restate our commitment to mainstream nutrition in our operations. We are establishing a multi-sectoral working group on nutrition security. The working group will prepare a strategic framework for increasing ADB operations on nutritional security over the next 3 to 5 years, both sovereign and non-sovereign. It will also identify the international best practices to be adopted. Finally, we plan to run a pilot programs and scale up our work on nutrition smart agriculture, nutrition fortification, and gender-focused local productions. We also want to integrate a more nutritional focus in our support for fiscal safety nets. So again, just from this example, it is clear that social protection, health, gender, education, water, agriculture, local governance, and many other angles must be integrated to maximize the impact of the interventions. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to kick off this dialogue on a multi-sectoral approach to nutrition security. Let me thanks again to Nutrition International and my colleague, the President and CEO, Joel Spicer, and the whole organizing team for co-organizing this event. We are also very grateful to the experts and practitioners from our key partners who will share their thoughts and experiences with us. I look forward to today's discussion. Enjoy the discussion and have a good day. Back to you, Shirley. Thank you.
Dr. Sesentano, thank you very much for sharing some of those initiatives that the ADB is supporting. I mean, the statistics that you ran through, some of them are appalling, aren't they? But especially the statistics on stunting. Very worrying that many people across Asia still lack access to a healthy diet and that children are failing to get the initiative, the nutrition that they need. But the ADB, I have to say, has been and continues to be a champion in this field. And it was great to hear about initiatives such as reshaping agricultural systems and improving dietary diversity. And of course, establishing that multi-sectoral working group on nutrition security. And the multi-sectoral approach, of course, as we know, is extremely important. So thank you for outlining the strategy on how the ADB is planning to effectively respond to nutrition challenges. Thanks for sharing that with us. So now I am very pleased to introduce our next speaker. Joel Spicer is the president and CEO of Nutrition International. He's a global health leader with a track record of building and leading initiatives and partnerships in nutrition, maternal and child health, TB, HIV, innovative finance, and resource mobilization. Over his career, he's worked for the Canadian International Development Agency, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, Stop TB Partnership, World Bank, and in support of governments. Joel is passionate about leveling the playing field for the underprivileged, unlocking human potential for people living in poverty, and closing the missing opportunities gap. He's a proven track record of expanding the relevance, reach, impact of organizations by creating alignment among different actors and building momentum for collective action. Joel attended the Harvard School of Public Health on a Fulbright scholarship, where he obtained an MPH in international health, and also the London School of Economics and Political Science, where he earned an MSc in Development Studies. He's currently finalizing studies at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government on leadership in the non-profit sector. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Joel Spicer.
Thank you, Shuli, for that very kind introduction. First off, I'm very happy to join my esteemed co-host from the Asian Development Bank, Vice President Bambang Susantono. And I'd like to thank ADB for co-hosting this important Nutrition for Growth event. We've got excellent panelists and speakers lined up today, and it's great to see that so many people have joined for this important conversation about nutrition at such a critical time for our world. We are at a tipping point in the battle against malnutrition. In the past year and a half, we've seen a global pandemic trigger an economic crisis, which is now becoming a malnutrition crisis that could put even more lives at risk than the pandemic itself. Add conflict and climate change, and you have a perfect storm that is taking our world backwards. Now, you might wonder why, in the midst of all these crises, we should focus on nutrition. Why is nutrition important? Well, it's important because 1 out of every 3 people on the planet suffers from some form of malnutrition. It prevents their brains from developing fully, their bodies from growing properly, their immune systems from working effectively, and it exposes them to lifelong disease, disability, and disadvantage. It's important because the heaviest burden of malnutrition is borne by women and girls, particularly adolescents. Over 1 billion women and girls around the globe suffer from malnutrition. And this limits their opportunities, their potential, and their power. And there's really no way we can achieve gender equality for all without addressing it. It's also critical because the foundation of any health system is the immune system strength of the people in it. And you can't build strong immune systems without good nutrition from the beginning. So if we don't invest in nutrition from the beginning, our health systems are going to increasingly be spending their budgets on treating disease instead of on prevention and on creating better health. That's one of the reasons why universal health coverage is so important and why we have to put nutrition right at the heart of it. If we neglect nutrition, then no matter how many teachers we train or books we buy or schools we build, we're never going to achieve our education outcomes as long as a child is cognitively damaged before they set foot through the front door of that school. And so if you take these things together, if we allow the status quo to remain, the world simply will not move forward in a way that includes everyone. Yet it's actually within our power, if we choose, to build a much better world, And this is the main message behind the Sustainable Development Goals: leave no one behind. One of the most important places to start is nutrition, because an investment in nutrition is an investment in the power of people. It's not only an investment in their health, but also in their education, in their potential, in their productivity, and in their human capital. It's also a key driver of progress because a well-nourished, healthy, and educated population is the foundational prerequisite for growth and for inclusive economic development. So when you have this strong foundation, good things begin to happen. Productivity goes up, people earn more money, and tax revenue increases, and countries have increasing power to invest their own resources in essential services like quality education and improved healthcare. And you can create a virtuous cycle that begins to pull people out of poverty. Now, none of this is easy. I don't want to pretend that it is. There are no silver bullets. There is no magic switch. But there is evidence-driven planning supported by long-term technical assistance, driven by stable, predictable financing, and backed by sustained political will. At Nutrition International, our focus is on bringing these things together and creating a nexus point where evidence, capability, and action come together to drive scale. Now, one of the ways we do this is by providing long-term embedded technical assistance to both national and subnational governments across multiple sectors impacting nutrition. In this way, we act as an expert ally by generating and analyzing data to support their decision-making, by modeling both the health and the economic benefits of investing in nutrition, as well as the costs of inaction, so they can see the trade-offs and make their own decisions, and by helping them build costed multi-sectoral action plans and supporting implementation to drive impact. So we also engage by partnering on the other side with international and regional institutions to identify financing, to make it nutrition smart, and match it to costed and prioritized action plans that need additional financing to succeed. And that's why we were really pleased to join the Asian Development Bank in hosting this conversation on multi-sectoral approaches today. I think we can all support the theory behind multi-sectoral approaches, but we also have to acknowledge that achieving true integration across sectors is difficult. And one of the areas that offers real opportunity and is a major focus for Nutrition International is taking a no missed opportunities approach to integrating nutrition into social safety nets and social protection programs. These have expanded significantly, particularly in response to COVID, also in Asia. They serve as ready, flexible platforms for reaching the most vulnerable people, and they're a platform we can add a lot of value to. So these safety nets amount to major investments in human capital, investments in young lives today and for future generations. They represent a huge opportunity to ensure the healthy growth and development of children, adolescents, and women through good nutrition. But because nutrition smart goals, components, and linkages have not yet been fully adopted in national social protection policies, many opportunities are being missed. And even when they're adopted, they're often not fully or effectively implemented. We can change this. Now, during this session today, we're going to hear about the successes as well as the challenges that countries are facing in implementing multi-sectoral approaches like this. We're going to see, as partners, researchers, and development actors, how we can make social protection programs work better for nutrition and deliver greater value and impact for people who need it most. This requires a context-specific approach based on evidence and practicality. And this is just one example. We can find many more opportunities when we begin looking through a no missed opportunities lens. And we have to do this because reaching the SDGs requires us to come together, to break down silos and to link our efforts. And that's why the pledge we heard today from Vice President Dr. Susan Tono is so important. Having a strong regional SDG champion like ADB engage on nutrition is a real game changer. And I want to thank the ADB for their commitment. I am happy to commit that Nutrition International will strongly support these efforts. We will do that by helping to build the tools and generating the data governments and institutions need to make nutrition smart investments, by supporting national as well as subnational governments to build evidence-based multi-sectoral nutrition action plans that are finance ready, And we'll also do that by deepening our collaboration and partnerships with multilateral development banks like ADB, foundations, and donors to close the missed opportunities gaps and make more investment portfolios nutrition smart. Nutrition can no longer be considered as an optional investment or as one choice among many. If we're going to reach our development goals, if we're going to build back better, and if we're going to deliver on our ambitions for gender equality, for education, and for economic growth that includes everyone, nutrition has to be an essential element of all of our work. So as 2021 comes to a close, we face many complex challenges, but there's also real opportunity. If we are courageous, if we are ambitious, and if we are united, we can rise to meet those challenges in front of us. If we can combine new partnerships and approaches with deliberate, focused action aimed at protecting and unlocking human potential, we can alter the trajectory for millions of people on this planet. But we have to move with urgency and focus not only on getting more financing for nutrition, but on extracting the maximum impact from every dollar, taka, pound, and yen that we invest in nutrition too. I want to thank all members of this session who will be sharing their experiences with multi-sectoral approaches, as well as the ADB for joining us in hosting this important conversation. And of course, my thanks to all of you for joining us today. Back to you, Shuli.
You for sharing your insights. I mean, again, sobering statistics about the impact of malnutrition. You make the really excellent point that good nutrition has both health and economic benefits. And of course, it's the foundation of any progressive functioning society. As my daughter would say, it's a no-brainer because investing in nutrition means you're investing in the future of the country. Very good to hear how Nutrition International works with governments to aid policymaking and finance decisions. And especially, I think, the focus on the no missed opportunities approach for integrating nutrition into social safety nets. And I think it goes without saying, you put it perfectly, the partnership between the Asian Development Bank and Nutrition International really promises a firm opportunity to forge some real progress on the ground. So on that note, let me bring back Dr. Susantono to rejoin you, Joel. I want to see both of you on screen because this is a match made in heaven. So we're going to seal the deal with a photograph of the pair of you side by side. Now, I know you're not in the same room, but we're going to do it with the magic of technology. So both of you look into the camera. So shall we try if Joel, if you put, which hand did you put up there? Your right hand. Okay, and Dr. Susantono, put no other hand for you, Dr. Susantono. Excellent. Bit closer, bit closer. No, not bad, not bad. Why don't you both look the way that your hands are facing? So Joel, you look that way, and Dr. Susantono, you look the other way. Look the way your hand is pointing, so it looks as though you're looking at each other. That's it. No, other way, Dr. Susantono. Other way, Dr. Susantono. Perfect. Hold it there.
How odd.
I think have we got that photograph?
I sure hope so.
Good. I've been told we're good. Gentlemen, stay with me for just a second longer. What I want to do now is bring back all our speakers who are speaking today, all our panelists. If all of you make sure your cameras are switched on, and you'll be brought back into the room. And what I want you all to do, there you go, you're all on screen. We're all going to look at the camera. And normally for a photo, we'd say cheese, but because this is about nutrition, we're going to say fortified cheese. And we're going to smile for about 5 seconds. Here we go.
Fortified cheese.
Fortified cheese. There you go, a room full of strangers all smiling at each other in a sign of the times, which is that we're all on a virtual platform. Okay, have we got that? I can't tell if we've got that or not. I think we've got it because they've come back to me. Dr. Susantono, Joel Spicer, thank you very much indeed for joining us today and for indulging us in that photo opportunity. Really appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thanks, Shuli. Thanks, Dr. Susantono.
So we are now turning our attention to the main part of the session. Now we have a great panel of speakers for you who are going to give us examples of how malnutrition is being tackled in their respective countries, what has been achieved, what the challenges are. You can see them on the screen. I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. So just to remind our audience, wherever you're joining us from today, please do submit your questions, because our panelists will be happy to answer some of those comments and queries from the floor after their presentations. So I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker. She is an expert in nutritional biology. Her research focuses on understanding the impacts of multi-sectoral and nutrition-sensitive programs on diet, nutrition, health, and well-being outcomes, how impacts are achieved and their cost effectiveness. She works closely with government partners and implementing organizations such as the World Food Programme and Helen Keller International. Let's all welcome Deanna Olney of the Poverty, Health and Nutrition Division at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Deanna.
Thank you, Julie, and thanks to the ADB and Nutrition International for inviting me to give this opening talk for this very, hopefully, exciting and interesting panel. So today I'll be focusing on how to adapt social assistance programs to address malnutrition in all its forms in Asia and the Pacific. Next. As we've heard from the previous speakers, malnutrition is highly prevalent in Asia and the Pacific. More than 350 million people are undernourished and about 1 billion are overweight or obese. All forms of malnutrition have likely been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, it's been estimated that moderate or severe wasting has increased by, or will increase by 14% among children less than 5 years of age. And more than 50% of these new additional cases are expected to come in Asia. If we look at the prevalence of malnutrition, according to different indicators such as stunting, wasting, overweight, obesity, and anemia, we can see that they vary across the different sub-regions within Asia. For example, stunting and overweight and obesity are highest in the Pacific, whereas wasting and anemia are highest in South Asia. Next. We've also heard that poor quality diets are a primary cause of all forms of malnutrition, and it's also known now that it's the leading cause of diseases worldwide. Nearly 2 billion people in Asia and the Pacific cannot afford a healthy diet. And again, this varies somewhat by region, with the highest proportion of people unable to afford a healthy diet in South Asia, followed by Southeast Asia and then Melanesia. The COVID-19 pandemic has likely increased this number substantially. For example, it's estimated that an additional 140 million will be living in extreme poverty, and there is likely to have been or will be a 50% increase in acute food insecurity in low and middle income countries. Next. To illustrate these points, we'll look at some data from a recent study in Sri Lanka. And in this graph, we're looking at the impact of COVID-19 as perceived by smallholder farmers in the bottom half of the graph, and looking at reported food insecurity in the top half of the graph across 2 rounds of data collection that were done, first represented by the green dots in December 2020 through February 2021, and then the second represented by the yellow dots between July 2021 and September 2021. What we can see is that nearly 3/4 of households experienced some form of food insecurity. Most was mild or moderate, but about 15% also experienced severe food insecurity. And this did not vary much across the 2 rounds of data collection, despite a severe increase in cases in Sri Lanka across these 2 time points. When these smallholder farmer households were asked if COVID-19 or the mitigation measures that had been put in place had affected their households, most answered yes. About 80 to 85% of households said that they had been affected by COVID-19 or the mitigation measures that had been put in place. And while about 30% mentioned health effects for themselves or their household members, the majority of the effects that people focused on were income, food availability decreasing, food costs going up, travel restrictions, and having to sell livestock and assets to meet these income losses. Next. So as we've heard from the previous speakers, We understand that we need to use multi-sectoral programs and strategies to improve diets and to reduce all forms of malnutrition. There's a long history of understanding of the need to do this. For example, in 2013, the Lancet Nutrition Series highlighted the need to make large-scale programs across multiple sectors nutrition sensitive to address the underlying causes of malnutrition. In 2020, a paper in the Food and Nutrition Bulletin highlighted 7 opportunities for improving impact of programs on diet and nutrition outcomes. And in 2021, a report on the food and nutrition situation in Asia has called for integrating actions across health, WASH, education, agriculture, and social protection sectors to improve diets and reduce all forms of malnutrition. Some of these nutrition-sensitive opportunities have been used by the World Food Program in their program guidance and can be widely applicable to all kinds of programs that include education programs, social protection programs, and the like, include targeting nutritionally vulnerable groups, adding or linking to nutritionally relevant complementary activities, like, for example, in a general social protection program, adding a micronutrient fortified supplement for women or children who might be more nutritionally vulnerable than the average household member, ensuring the adequate quantity and nutritional quality of transfers, whether they be cash, vouchers, or food, making sure that they will meet the nutritional needs of those families or fill the gaps that are existing, make transfers conditional on things like attending preventive health visits or school, producing nutritionally relevant assets, such as hygiene and sanitation facilities at schools or irrigation for farmers. And then aligning with national nutrition action plans to ensure that whatever actions are taken can be integrated into larger policy and program schemes. And then lastly, applying a gender protection lens to better leverage these other sectors. Next. Another paper written in response to the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted 5 actions for safeguarding children's right to nutrition during the pandemic, and 2 of these deal specifically with social protection programs. These co-authors identified safeguarding and promoting access to nutritious, safe, and affordable diets, investing in improving maternal and child health and nutrition during pregnancy, infancy, and early childhood, reactivating and scaling up services for the early detection and treatment of child wasting, and then related to social protection, maintaining the provision of nutritious and safe school meals for vulnerable children, and expanding social protection to safeguard access to nutritious diets and essential services. Next. So why social protection? I think Joel Spicer spoke to this a bit, but this is a strategy that can be used to improve diets and combat all forms of malnutrition. It's known that low and middle countries spend about 1.5% of GDP on social safety net programs, such as cash, in-kind transfers, and school meals. And between 2000 and 2016, this had tripled and has likely increased even more due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Social assistance programs, which are a subset of social protection programs, are primarily designed to support the incomes and resilience of the poor. But in recent years, there's been more attention paid to making these programs work also for nutrition and health outcomes. So while most social assistance programs primarily seek to increase food security and fill short-term income gaps, this is not translated into improvements for nutrition largely. Thus, how to best make these types of programs work for nutrition in what context and for which populations remains an open question. Next, please. To start to understand this question a little bit more, we recently conducted a review of social assistance programs that had diet and nutrition outcomes measured for women or children. We looked at outcomes such as dietary diversity, micronutrient intake, and intake of micronutrient-rich foods, and nutritional status outcomes such as anthropometric outcomes, anemia, and micronutrient status. To summarize the impacts across the variety of studies that were included, we pooled results by program type and outcome type and considered the impacts for each individual treatment arm that was included in the studies as the unit of analysis. Next. So in the next 4 slides, I'll talk about the summary results from 4 types of programs: cash transfer programs, in-kind transfers, vouchers, and school meals. And in the first 2, I'll use these graphs to illustrate what we found in these studies. So for the first is cash transfers. And what we're looking at here is the proportion of studies that found a positive effect on the different diet or nutrition outcomes, either for women or for children. The purple bars represent women and the yellow bars represent children. So what we can see is that for dietary diversity for women, all of the study arms that measured this, although there were only a few, found positive impacts on dietary diversity. A few studies also found positive impacts on women's BMI and hemoglobin, and 2/3 of the studies that assessed impacts on anemia also found positive effects. Among children, about half of the studies found positive effects on dietary diversity, about 1/3 on stunting, and about 60% on wasting. However, none of the studies that assessed impact on hemoglobin or anemia found positive effects among children. Next. For in-kind transfers, we see a bit of a different pattern. Among women, dietary diversity, there was a positive effect of about 75% of the studies on dietary diversity, and also for hemoglobin. And about 40% of the studies found positive impacts on BMI and 25% on anemia. For children, fewer studies found positive effects for dietary diversity among children. Only about 1/3 found positive effects. About half, or a little less than a half, found positive effects on stunting, and about half on wasting. Only a few studies measured impact on hemoglobin or anemia, but 3 of the 4 found a positive effect on hemoglobin, but only 1 of those found an effect on anemia. Next. For vouchers, there were very few studies that used rigorous methods to assess the impact on diet or nutrition outcomes at the individual level. And so for women, we only found 2 studies that were published between 2010 and 2020 that looked at the impact of voucher schemes on women's outcomes. And of these, 1 each found positive effects on vitamin A, anemia, and BMI, but 1 found a negative effect on anemia. Among children, we found that there were positive impacts on stunting in 1 of the 2 studies that looked at this impact. And in the 1 study that looked at impacts on micronutrient status, it also found positive effects. But there were no impacts on wasting or anemia in the 2 studies that assessed those outcomes. Next. For school meals, there's pretty consistent evidence that these types of programs can improve anemia or reduce anemia and improve micronutrient status, and in some cases, cognitive outcomes. 1 study did highlight, though, that these types of programs need to consider the different trade-offs and potential negative impacts, even though they're unintended. For example, 1 study found an increase in the prevalence of hookworm infection with the provision of fortified rice, where hookworm infection prevalence was greater than 15%. Next. So what does it take to make social assistance programs work for nutrition? Pretty consistent finding is that targeting women and children increases the likelihood of positive impacts on an array of diet and nutrition outcomes. There is a clear need to ensure adequate quantity, quality, and duration of transfers of all kinds. However, depending on the context, you also need to consider how to address all forms of malnutrition. For example, where stunting and overweight and obesity coexist, you may need different strategies, or you may need some kind of nuanced strategy to address both forms of malnutrition simultaneously. High quality nutrition, health, and hygiene BCC activities may increase impacts, but the findings on this are pretty inconsistent, likely due to variability in quality, frequency, duration, and also food security status or availability of other types of inputs to assess, to change health and nutrition practices. School meals can be effective for supporting the education, health, and nutrition of school-age children, particularly for the most disadvantaged. And improvements in nutrition, health, and cognitive outcomes, especially among girls, can also have intergenerational effects. So we should not just be concentrating on short-term effects of these types of programs, but also on their long-term and intergenerational effects. However, across the board, to achieve impacts, programs need to be well-designed, implemented, targeted, and taken up by the intended populations. Next. So what more do we need to know to better leverage social assistance programs for achieving diet and nutrition outcomes? We need to know more about the effects of these types of programs on different types of groups, such as preschoolers and adolescents. We need to know more about the range of outcomes that they can achieve, such as the impact of social assistance programs on micronutrient status and the prevalence of overweight and obesity. We also need to think about the effectiveness of different types of social protection programs like homegrown school feeding programs that not only aim to improve diets of school children, but also the incomes of smallholder farmers. We also need more information on the effectiveness of different types of programs for improving diet and nutrition outcomes, such as public works, resilience, and graduation programs. We also need to understand better the different program components, because these programs are expensive. And so we need to better understand which components are absolutely necessary and what needs to be included in a package to successfully improve diets and nutrition. And like I mentioned before, we do need to pay attention to how to design social assistance programs to address both undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies at the same time as addressing the increasing rates of overweight and obesity. Next. So in conclusion, we know that malnutrition is pervasive in Asia and the Pacific, and gains in the last decade are threatened by the impacts of COVID-19. Multi-sectoral strategies, including nutrition-sensitive social assistance programs, are needed to combat all forms of malnutrition. Yet there is still much to learn about how to best design, target, and scale social assistance programs for achieving the necessary improvements in diet and nutrition outcomes. Program research partnerships should be leveraged to fill key evidence gaps, to expand the impact of social assistance programs beyond food security and short-term income gaps, and ultimately to increase their cost effectiveness. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Shuli. Thank you.
Deanna, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that. A comprehensive look at some of the programs that are targeting vulnerable groups and implementing nutrition solutions. It's interesting to hear that investment in social protection programs has increased. I know, though, there is a long way to go. There's a lot of potential to do more. I think the key message from you is that there is a need to get governance and authorities and policymakers to really integrate nutrition needs into their social protection programs, and particularly when it comes to targeting women and children. Also good to hear about the success of cash transfer programs and their impact on diet diversity and wasting. And I think we're going to hear more about those kind of interventions from our other speakers. So Deanna, thank you very much. I know you're going to stay with us and take some questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me now introduce our next speaker, Vivi Yulaswati, Senior Advisor to the Minister of National Development Planning for Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction for Indonesia. She provides analysis and advice on policies and strategies on social development, accelerating poverty reduction and creating an enabling environment for inclusive development. She has long experience in developing major poverty reduction programs, including the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. She can explain some of the actions which Indonesia is taking to improve social protection and nutrition. Welcome.
Thank you, Shuli. Good morning, good afternoon. It's been a pleasure to be part of the event. Thank you for the ADB for inviting me. Distinguished resource persons and also ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share some slides in regard to Indonesians' experience on how to link the nutrition issues with social protection. Can you post the slide? Okay. Yeah, in Indonesia, the social protection has been one of the important policies, particularly in building human capital and protecting from any shocks, as well as reducing the poverty. There are two pillars on the social protection. First is on the social insurance and also the social assistance. For the one who are poor and also vulnerable up until 40%, we have a database by name, by address, and by having a unified database, we could design our social protection that are more targeted based on their needs. For the social insurance, we mainly focus on the health and 4 other programs under laborers, including pension, old age, accident, and also several others in relate to the laborers. ladies and gentlemen, as you may know that COVID has happened in many countries, including Indonesia. So for the poverty in Indonesia that already decreased to the single digit, after the pandemic, it increased to above 10%. So by doing make other budget efficiency and several other transformation, the government has extended the social protection programs to include not only expanding the current level of coverage as well as targets and benefit from from the current programs, but also add many other programs to protect the poor and the vulnerable from the COVID-19. Again, the food is one of the biggest social assistance in Indonesia before and after the COVID. So I would like to focus more on the food assistance programs to relate with the nutrition issues. Rice is one of the most staple food, the most important staple food in Indonesia. So after we hit by the Asian financial crisis, the government implement the rice subsidy since 1998. It provides rice for about 15 kgs per month for about 15.5 million households. And there are 6 criteria applied to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of the program. First, how to target to the right people, distribute right quantity and right quality as well as price because it's subsidy, and right time, and with, of course, in correct administration. However, almost 20 years implementations and many evaluations showed that the leakage of the rice subsidy is up until 60%. It went not only to the poor and vulnerable, but also to the higher decile of percentiles. That's why since 2015, the government tried to transform this program. It took more than 2 years to really transform it into food voucher assistance. So in the new program, the family received not in the in-kind, rather in the non-cash or through the card used through the bank system. So it functions as an e-wallet of the integrated social assistance. So the holders, we can track what kind of assistance that they receive. For the one who have children, they also got the conditional cash transfer and several other assistance. So initially, the government asked that this card can purchase the rice and egg, but in the implementation, they actually also can be purchased for many others, including the oil or the non-food stuff. So we try to go with preparing to other studies to show that how could we increase the value for money for this bigger social assistance. And by the data, we could see that in fact, Indonesia has some problem in the nutrition. So the effort, how to invest in nutrition or how to increase the value for money and relating to the nutrition. From the left-hand side, we could see that the stunting prevalence actually decreasing from 37 to 27 in 2019. But we could see around 13 provinces has very high prevalence of stunting. It's above 30%. There are some other problems like 1 out of 10 children under 5 are overweight. And also there are some problems in anemia and obesity. And after COVID, the prevalence of undernourishment is actually increasing to 8.3. So in 2018, we did the cost of diet study, work with the WFP to advocate how to make the program is more effective for the nutrition. So we applied by doing the survey and see the affordability of the local food and also the impact. And some evidence and recommendations shows that better nutrition impact by determine certain nutritious food would give a bigger impact. So from the survey, we could see that it is possible to purchase a nutritious diet using food or local food. And food availability is not a key barrier actually to better nutrition. Rice, egg, green leafy vegetables met the nutritional requirement at the lowest cost. Affordability is a key barrier for the poor, but their preference impeded by the knowledge and also the convenience on the distance to afford and also education. Adding for some nutritious package for the baby as a greater nutritional impact for children is also important. E-voucher should have sufficient cash value, specify which food in which amount, include behavior change, communication, or nutritious food choices. And of course, it needs to be complemented with the monitoring on the food expenditure, dietary diversity, nutrient intake to evaluate its contribution to the nutrition. However, we also recommend further study to have or to learn more on the implication on the supply chain, the regions with a specific requirement, particularly in remote places. So these recommendations have been applied to further reform the food assistance in Indonesia, and in the or during the COVID recovery, the government improved or doubling the coverage of the size of the benefit, as well as determine about the usage of the values in the card in order to improve the protein, the vitamin A, as well as on the iron. One more strategy that we have is using the family development station in the conditional cash transfer. From this data, we could see here that the target for the programs is huge, is to 10 million households who have children, as well as the elderly. So we apply the 4 modules, including the health and nutrition on education. Other modules including the parenting education, family financial management, as well as the child protection. However, within the implementation monthly, the mother recipients could have or combine all these 4 modules. And one of the popular or favorite module is on the nutrition, because the mother recipients could see and could feel, could get a sense how important the nutrition for their children. And the end-line evaluation showed that there is an increased household per capita spending for about 3.3 and around 3.4% for food consumption, which almost 1% goes for nutritious food. A couple main takeaways that I would share here, that 3 forms, including after the COVID, because from Indonesia case, we gonna do many reforms. It's really open up the opportunity to improve any system and broader focus, particularly on nutrition. Social protection policy that are more comprehensive and inclusive could be a key strategy to address nutrition issues, along with the longer-term structural poverty reduction and human capital development. Coordination, collaboration, and open decision-making process among stakeholders are key for the success implementation. And of course, it needs to be accompanied to promote macro policies on how to get the funding. So redirect spending from regressive subsidy and inefficient spending to better allocation and value for money is really make it worth to improve the nutrition status. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi. Thank you very much indeed for that. It's really interesting to hear that, like so many countries, the Indonesian government has extended its social protection programs because of COVID. Clearly, they still have a lot to do. As you've said, they need reform to be more comprehensive in dealing with nutrition. And high prices, of course, a key barrier to nutritional food. So it was good to hear about the rice subsidy reform. That's clearly an important initiative to tackle that. And you were also telling us about the conditional cash transfer program, which is another important tool. It's interesting because Indonesia, of course, is one of those countries that has a double nutrition burden. You've got stunting and wasting on one hand and obesity on the other. So programs like e-vouchers and things which help with better access to nutritious food, all very good to hear about. Thank you very much indeed for that, Vivi. Now I am pleased to introduce Insetseg Bayamba. She is a professor at the National University of Mongolia, as well as teaching. She's led several studies reporting to and advising the government of Mongolia. Her main research areas are population and development, fertility and social protection issues, including poverty, disability, and the elderly. And she's going to talk us through the social welfare policy in Mongolia. Dr. Bayamba, welcome.
I don't see my presentation.
Your screen where it says program feed, you've got it. There you go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers of this event and for inviting me today. I'm today going to present about the food stamp program in Mongolia. And I've divided my presentation into 4 parts. Next, please. And first of all, I would like to talk about the short history of the food stamp program in Mongolia, how it's initiated and how it has been developed and implemented over time, and also the impacts of the food stamp program, next part. And then, as we're talking about today, about the COVID-19 and how the food stamp program was played a role as a response of the COVID-19. And the last part is how the food stamp can play a role within the social protection system in Mongolia. So here in the slide, you can see some of the facts. The first, according to the national poverty line, poverty is very high, like almost 30%. And Dr. Vivi said the Indonesia has done the slow down the poverty to the single digit, but I'm really sorry to say about my country, like it's almost 30% over the 10 years. And also the mixed study conducted in the 2020 that shows that the 28% of the population experiencing some food security in Mongolia. And also the malnutrition and dietary diversity and micronutrient deficiencies are very common in Mongolia, according to the National Nutrition Survey. So in order to protect the poor and secure the food insecurity, there should be some mechanism to protect the poor and vulnerable people. Next slide. So now I'm going to briefly talk about the food stamp program. And actually the program was conceived and started in 2008 in a response to the very high inflation. Like you can see in the graph that the inflation rate was 34% in 2008. So just to, in a way, as a way to protect the poor and vulnerable people, the food stamp program was started to implement. And with the technical and financial support of the Asian Development Bank, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection created project unit and to identify in charge of identifying households eligible to food stamps, managing the central operation, distribution, grievance and inquiries, monitoring and information campaigns. The program started as a pilot project of Asian Development Bank and expanded gradually and become a permanent national government program in 2018. And also the social welfare law includes the food stamp as one of the permanent social welfare program. Next slide. So the food stamp program, the Mongolia implements around 71 types of the social welfare program. But out of 71, the food stamp is the only program which targets to the poor. It aims to support the consumption of basic foods with the expected impact of reduced vulnerability to food security of poor households. In order to identify eligible households, the program uses proximity testing and integrated information household database was created under the program, and it covers like almost 75% of the total population. The food stamp program first targeted to the poorest 5%, and in the meantime, like in 2015 and 2018, during the economic slowdown, both the coverage and the amount has been increased. But by 2021, the food stamp program reaches to the poorest around 7 to 8% of the population. So the food stamp has aimed to try to support the diversification of the food. So a specific list of the 10 high protein foods can be redeemed by the food stamp. So as I said, the amount has been increased 3 times. So the amount of the food stamp is now 16,000 per adults and 18,000 Mongolian Tugrek for children. So just to say that during the pandemic in 2020, the amount has been doubled twice for 8 months. So the food stamp started in secure, the paper forms, and now it's 100% electronic. And at the beginning, the recipients, the beneficiaries, go to the local shop to buy the foods, but now it's any shop that issue the VAT receipts can issue the food stamp. So these are the basic information about the development of the food stamp program. Next slide. Now I will move to some of the impacts of the food stamp program. Since its implementation, the food stamp program has been evaluated several times, covering different areas of the Mongolia, and both the qualitative and quantitative studies has been conducted. Next slide. And both of the, I'm not going to talk details about the impact evaluation, but the next slide, please. And both the quantitative and qualitative study result shows that the food stamp has substantial positive impacts, not only for the security, but also for the dietary diversity, and people were avoiding negative coping strategies during the shock, and also it has impact on self-esteem, positive impact. And to some extent, the qualitative study was found that some of the positive examples of the employment and also the education, especially for the children. And for the next slide, I'm going to show the bit of more detail. So the impact evaluation result shows that comparing with the treatment and control household. So compared with the control household, treatment household has been responded that they have 1.9 fewer months without food provisioning. The second slide is on food diversity, especially for the children. Next. Yeah, so this graph also shows that compared with the control group, treatment group, the households, children in households receiving food stamp have more diverse food, dietary diets compared with the control group. So basically, so we can conclude this section that the food stamp has a very positive impact. Okay, now I'm going to move to during the pandemic, how the food stamp was played a role. Because again, like in 2018 and 2015 and 2018, we had economic slowdown and high inflation. And as like other years, the significant high inflation, especially for the food items, we experienced, especially in 2021. So we had a strict lockdown, several lockdowns, and border closure. So these all affected by job loss, and farmers and herders affected by drop in price of Kashmir. And the farm survey conducted by the National Statistical Office and the World Bank confirmed the impact of COVID on people, and they are reported that they've been worried about not having enough food and eating only few kinds of foods. So government implemented two package of the social shock responsive measures. In terms of the social protection, government responded to increase the value of many cash transfers, including the Universal Child Money Program, the food stamp, and the social welfare pension. So the Asian Development Bank, the microsimulation study, covered the impacts of these mitigations. So the results shows that all these informations really have mitigated the potential negative impact of the crisis. As I said, the food stamp, for example, has been doubled during this time. So now I will talk about the food stamps within the broader social protection system. So as I said, the Child Money Program, Child Grant, is a universal. Compared with the Child Grant, the food stamp have relatively low coverage, but focus on relatively poor and vulnerable households. The role is complementary to that of other programs, allowing an increase in support to very poor households and those who have extra needs, for example, with the members with disabilities. So the information household integrated system, which is the social registry, that can enable not only the increase the amount of food, but also the number of people receiving them. Beyond the pandemic, this can be a crucial importance to respond to shocks that often affect Mongolia, such as Zud. It's particularly happens during the harsh winter, which the herders lost massive losses of livestock. So now I'm going to move to some takeaways. So increasing the food consumption and improving the food intake and nutrition are different. Increasing food consumption is a necessary but not sufficient condition to improve nutrition. Social protection supports food consumption, but in succeed in nutrition, there is need to complementary policies with behavior change message and control of food quality. And food stamp in Mongolia not only improve food consumption, but also dietary diversity through the list of eligible items and their mean of payment. The network of accredited shops where people can use food stamps is a way to monitor quality and availability of food stamps. Thank you.
Dr. Bamba, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for explaining about the food stamp program and how it's an important part of Mongolia's social welfare policy. I was scribbling down notes as you were speaking because I think it's great that it targets the poorest households. It's had a very positive impact. I think you said the amount had doubled twice in 8 months. I mean, that really shows real commitment from the Mongolian government. And I think it's also important that you were saying that the program has been evaluated because, I mean, if you know how or if a policy is working, that means it can be made more effective in terms of cost and coverage. So thank you very much indeed for explaining that for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's introduce our final speaker now, Dr. Fermin Adriano, Undersecretary for Policy, Planning and Research at the Department of Agriculture for the Government of Philippines. Dr. Fermin is a highly accomplished academic, scholar, writer and policy advisor to key government officials. He's extensive experience in advising successive agriculture secretaries. He's also a journalist and author with several published works on peace and conflict concerns, rural development, agriculture and agrarian reform. Dr. Fermin, great to have you. Please talk us through Manila's approach to nutrition security.
Thank you very much, Julie, for the kind introduction, and good morning or good afternoon to the participants wherever you are in this planet. My first slide, please. May I share the first slide? Okay. May I have the next slide, please? The next one, please. Okay. Sustained economic growth by the Philippines, averaging at more than 6% annually for the decade 2010 to 2019, resulted in a significant decline in poverty incidence from 24.6% in 2009 to 16.6% in 2018, or a drop of about 8%. Next slide, please. However, incidences of malnutrition and stunting among children remained high. The National Nutrition Survey conducted by the government revealed that around 5.8% of children under 5 suffer from wasting. 28.8% of our kids under 5 are stunted, and 19% of children under 5 are underweight. Next slide, please. In response, the government launched a three-pronged approach to the challenge of malnutrition. The first were the nutrition-specific programs that address the immediate causes of maternal and child malnutrition. Next, please. Next slide. The second were nutrition-sensitive programs that targeted the underlying causes of malnutrition. Next slide, please. And the third were enabling programs that were meant to strengthen the response of various government institutions from the national to the local involved in addressing the problem of malnutrition. While the government efforts were starting to show positive results, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020 halted its progress and, in fact, worsened the problem of malnutrition. This was mainly due to the loss of jobs of many workers, resulting in significant income losses, contributing to the inability of many Filipino families to access food, particularly the nutritious one. Next slide, please. A government survey conducted during the height of the pandemic in 2020 revealed that the proportion of Filipino households which experienced hunger rose from 9.3% pre-pandemic to 21% during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Moreover, the proportion of food insecure households increased from 4 out of 10 pre-pandemic and 6 out of 10 during the pandemic. Expectedly, the problem of malnutrition, already serious during the pre-pandemic, was further aggravated during the pandemic. Next slide, please. The government responded to this heightened challenge of malnutrition by creating an interagency task force on zero hunger under its whole of government approach to address the problem. The task force aimed to improve coordination among government agencies, addressing the worsening problem of malnutrition by tapping expertise and resources from various government sources and the private sector. It also ensured that the correct fiscal and trade policies were adopted to guarantee the unimpeded flow of adequate food supply at affordable prices. Next slide, please. A major component of the social protection program of the government is the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, or locally known as Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program, or PORPIS. It started in 2007 among pilot families, and now it has expanded its scope to cover more than 4 million Filipino households, benefiting more than 20 million poor Filipinos. The aim of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program was to break the cycle of what we call intergenerational transmission of poverty among the poor household. Next slide, please. Two factors were seen as key elements in achieving this goal of reducing poverty and malnutrition. Namely, one, ensuring that children attend and stay in school until they at least complete secondary education. And two, protecting the health of mothers and their infants by regular prenatal and postnatal checkups. Next slide, please. Local studies have shown that the longer the schooling of a kid, the better his or her chances of landing a better paying job. A high school graduate receives a higher compensation than an elementary graduate, and we found out that college graduate definitely receives a higher compensation than a secondary or high school graduate. On the other hand, it is universally recognized that caring for the infant and the mother with proper nutrition during the first 1,000 days of the child's existence is vital in healthy brain development. Next slide, please. The importance of providing nutritious food to children are highlighted during the regular family development session, or FDS, conducted among mothers who are conditional cash transfer beneficiaries. While the conditional cash transfer program has improved the well-being of poor Filipinos, its effectiveness is unfortunately being eroded due to several design rigidities that must be addressed. Next slide, please. Among them are the following. One, the need to continually update the list of beneficiaries, given that quite a sizable number of them have already graduated from the program, but many, due to yearly population growth, are waiting to be included in the list. Second, there's a need to secure more funding for the program, given growing number of beneficiaries, and that the ceiling for cash assistance given to the beneficiaries did not take into consideration the inflation rate. And three, there will be a need to tighten monitoring of school attendance of children belonging to the beneficiary family and mother in the family development session, which also needs a review of its modules to strengthen nutrition education related program. Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon to all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Furman. Great to hear about what the government is doing in the Philippines. I mean, as you say, as with everywhere, the outbreak of COVID-19's increased the problem of malnutrition, but the Philippines government has adopted an interagency approach. It's trying to work with other sectors to improve its solutions in this area. Interesting to hear about the conditional cash transfer program. I'm not going to try and say it in the Filipino language, but that is a very positive step towards trying to break this cycle of poverty in poor households, which will really be a major step in improving future outcomes in terms of nutrition and development. Thank you very much indeed for that. So we have got to the part of the program now where we're going to open the floor for questions. And again, people joining us from anywhere in the world, if you want to put your questions to our speakers, then do type them into the chat box and we will get through as many of them as possible. We're going to start with a reflection on gender and social protection, which was submitted by Nutrition International a little earlier on. So I'm going to read this out for you. This is what it says. Women and girls have been facing a disproportionately high burden during the COVID-19 pandemic. The gender gap in food and nutrition insecurity has grown even larger. Studies show food insecurity was 10% higher among women than men in 2020. That's an increase on the year before. During the pandemic, women have had reduced economic opportunities, decreased access to nutritious foods, increased gender-based violence, ever-increasing workloads. Girls are more likely to discontinue education and get married or get pregnant and engage in low-paying jobs, which further push them into a lifelong cycle of malnutrition and ill health. The N4G Summit presents a unique reset moment, and the potential of this opportunity can be fully harnessed only if women and girls are placed at the center of policymaking and planning. Well, I couldn't agree more with those words. Let me bring in one of our speakers. Insekseg, I know that this is something you've been looking at, and I know that you would agree with those comments on gender impact, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. What would you say to that?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. And I really agree what you said about the impacts of the COVID-19 on women and children. And these all are already illustrated by the study conducted in Mongolia during this COVID-19. So I just want to say the study, like UNICEF study, found that the households, like female-headed households, affected negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic by like 14 percentage points than the male. And if I go to the food stamp program, like 56% of the beneficiaries of the food stamp are female, and 15% of the households are female-headed. The most of the beneficiaries really increasingly rely on the regular payments of the child money program and the food stamp for their basic needs. And we have done the COVID impact on women and children by the UNESCO, and many of the women interviewed by recently of this study highlighted that they were not able to afford the meat and vegetables, and so turned to only basic food that were not nutritious, such as flour and cheap meat. And also during the strictest lockdown days, some families even went without food. The recipients of the food stamp program said that the food stamps were really lifesavers for them during the pandemic.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So a question coming into us from the audience. COVID-19 has led to a decrease in incomes, a decrease in access to foods, economies have slowed down. So what can be done to improve nutrition in this context as the pandemic continues? Maybe this is something I can put to you, Deanna. Obviously, there is a lot of pressure on resources right now, particularly with everyone in recovery mode after the pandemic. Economies are massively under pressure. How do we make sure that nutrition doesn't get left behind in the scramble to improve budgets?
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for that question. I think, there's many ways to try to kind of stretch the dollar, right? Or to make the most of those dollars. And I think using some of those nutrition sensitive opportunities that we mentioned earlier, and like it was mentioned in the presentation from Indonesia, where the cost of affordable diet can be the same as the current subsidy, so making small tweaks in current programs to better, create a package that has more nutritional quality, a higher nutritional quality, could go a long way. So could targeting the transfers or any type of social assistance directly to women or girls, especially adolescents and women with young children. And so I think there are ways to target the dollars that do exist for these types of programs to make them work better for achieving nutrition outcomes.
Thank you, Diana. Do any of our other guests want to comment on how best to utilize resources? Go ahead, Dr. Furman.
May I, Julie? Actually, our conditional cash transfer particularly target women because we found out, and we have a panel data of that and a series of evaluation that giving the cash to the women result in an increase in the welfare of the family instead of giving it to men. Because the women, once they get cash, they usually buy nutritious food and the other requirements of the kids, which unfortunately do not happen to men when you give the cash. And that's the reason why the particular focus is really the women. And we found out that, as we said, that the women's need can be addressed by in ensuring that they stay in school for as long as they can, because if they're in school, their nutritional level is addressed at the same time. The longer they stay in school, they graduate, as said, the higher educational level, the better your chances of getting a higher compensation. And that's the reason why the entire structure of the conditional cash transfer is really focused, about 90% of it is really focused on our women, because we find them a very reliable partner in the development, including the nutrition agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, hence the importance of gender sensitivity when we're looking at policies and programs. Thank you very much for that. Another question that's come in, which is very relevant, is about governance in social protection systems. Poor governance across low and middle income countries can hamper the expected level of progress and expectations. So this is a question about how social protection programs and the social protection system is properly implemented under proper governance. I don't know if anyone has a view on how best governance can be observed for social protection programs. And maybe, Dr. Vivi, I can ask you, when it comes to the Indonesian government, how are these programs monitored and how well are they being implemented?
Thank you for the question. There are two ways. First, from the internal program, in which we put some system on the regular monitoring through the facilitators, which hand in hand with the local government and also at the village to get data from the communities on the progress and also some problems or other challenges. The other instrument that we did is working with other independent institutions, including the think tank, universities, as well as international organizations, to do more robust evaluations, including the RCTs, the qualitative and the quantitative or the mixed method ones, both in evaluate the effectiveness of the program as an input to keep revolve or improve the program itself, be it in the targeting, in the distributions, in the monitor, and how to engage and also educate the people, or including the women. Other is improve the capacity, particularly at the local level, to also have a capacity to build better data and system to monitor. So this is the key. If I may, I would like to add one more on the social capital, about the social accountability. If we know about the criteria or give a clear information to the community on the targeting, who are more eligible for this program and what is the intention for the program, and also for on other mechanism, how to report and so on, the community will have a productive productive collaboration with the local government in monitoring as well as reporting if there is any cases. So open venue of informations through cell phone, through website, to hotline, and also facilitators at the locals is one way to have a social accountability as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diana, can I just...
Ma'am Shuli, can I just
add
to
go
that?
ahead, Dr. Furman, go
sorry,
ahead.
just a short one. I think Madam Bibi said it, that the importance of governance, particularly the participation of local government. And we realized that in this pandemic, the best way to cope or to address the problem of pandemic is to really mobilize the local government units that we have, because they are on the ground. A lot of bottlenecks in food supply, etc., and all of those things can be properly addressed. And we keep on saying that the problem is just too big for the central government to handle it. We need all the help. And therefore, the LGUs play a very important role. And that's the reason why we're trying to download many of our food production activities, like, for example, urban agriculture, to the city governments, and then the community self-livelihood programs to our provincial and municipal governments, because that's the only way we can cope with this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Furman. Diana, yes, sorry, I was going to come to you. Dr. Furman's answered the question perfectly, but how important is it to, this whole discussion is talking about a multi-sectoral approach, bringing in different departments, bringing in different authorities, different players. That has got to help in making better, more effective programs which are properly monitored and properly evaluated, right?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think that's something that many countries and governments have been trying to do for several years now, is to try to really figure out how to operationalize multi-sectoral approaches and how to get distinct sectors talking to each other, understanding the languages that they use, like agriculture and nutrition, for example, and then bringing in local governments, and how can you get these different players that have different priorities, different areas of expertise, how can you get them all on the same page and moving in one direction, and having a shared common goal. And so I think a lot of work still needs to be done on really how to harmonize activities and reporting and all of these types of things, so that everyone can have a common vision and figure out what role they have to play in achieving that common vision. And I think that can go a really long way in making multi-sectoral programming work to achieve any outcome, whether it's gender outcomes, nutrition outcomes, health outcomes. And so I think, there's more work that needs to be done on how to actually make those engagements work and how to facilitate those.
Yeah, and these are exactly the kind of things we're talking about, and hopefully we'll be able to make some progress on. Diana, thank you for that. I'm going to read out another reflection now. This is on food systems. These are comments submitted by the Asian Development Bank. So I shall read this out. A key factor driving persistent malnutrition in Asia and the Pacific is the high cost of a healthy diet. A healthy diet is up to 9 times more expensive than a basic energy sufficient diet. And consequently, according to the FAO, 1.9 billion people in the region cannot afford a healthy diet. In some countries, local food prices have been rising, further reducing the lack of access to nutrition among low-income households. It seems clear that over the long term, food systems and productivity have to be transformed and improved to enable a steady supply of diversified and nutrition-rich food at affordable prices. What is the view of policymakers on this issue? I mean, it's absolutely correct that improved food systems are going to help with better affordability. It's a very complex issue, though. Would anyone like to say a few words about that statement?
Probably
I should. I think you've actually done a lot of work on food systems.
I'm in the center of policy making in the country. There's always that tension, that to be able to give affordable, the available and affordable food supply to our consumers. There's always this tension of protecting our local producers or our farmers versus importing those products. as a developing country, we suffer just most like developing countries from limited supply of certain food products, and particularly in the Philippines and also in Indonesia, which is the staple food is rice. So, but the thing is that there's always the tension that we need to protect our local producers from agricultural products or import products because of the fact that it is their livelihood. On the other hand, if we're going to meet the nutritional requirements of our people, we need to import them because of the supply shortage. That balancing act is extremely difficult, and it takes so much of my time, not only in terms of rice, but other commodities as well as chicken, pork, etc. down the line. And that's the role of the policymaker, to balance these two competing demands for the resources that we need to be able to feed our people. But definitely, the position of the government that is taken is that policy making, as they said, is obtaining benefiting the greatest number of people of the country, and therefore, if there's need to import to be able to meet the nutritional requirement of our people, we must do so because it will benefit the greatest majority of our people who are all consumers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Inseksak, can I bring you in? What has been the experience in Mongolia with high food prices, especially when it comes to the more nutritious foods? Clearly, that is something that the food stamp program was introduced to try and overcome.
Yeah. Actually, this food stamp program is the one those designed more easily adaptive to the shock responsive, and it's introduced in response to the food and financial crisis, and original intention should have been the shock responsive. And during this high inflation and the food, people are suffering from the food food diversity. It's really important to make sure that for example, the food stamp program is really trying to protect and support the poor households because they are more affected by this financial crisis and the high inflation. So even during this pandemic, this food stamp program was really justified intervention because of the, especially in the short term, because of the effective of the shock to the poor population. And also the one important thing is like how to respond to in a short time and very because intervention should be very quick. So the food stamp program was used as one of the response because it has the ability to deploy the payments quickly using this food stamp delivery mechanism, direct deposits to the bank account, to the beneficiary names. So I think it's very important to have a mechanism to protect the poor and vulnerable households during this shock. And so we should have mechanism. And in order to I would like to say that this food stamp program is really adaptive, shows that really adaptive social protection, one of the social protection mechanisms.
Yeah, so it was an immediate response introduced because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I wonder what our other panelists think. I mean, this question about food prices is a really important one because often less nutritious foods, I mean, even in rich countries, less nutritious foods are cheaper. So how do we get over that? What does it take? Is it going to be reform of agricultural policies? Is it going to be education? How do we bring prices down for more nutritious fruit and vegetables? Diana, maybe you'd like to have a comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to this a bit. We're actually I'm leading a new initiative actually on fruit and vegetables for sustainable healthy diets. It's a new CGIAR initiative that will be starting next year. But in that, we're planning to use an end-to-end approach. So, I mean, we have to address these issues of availability, affordability, accessibility, and then also the desirability piece. Because it's not only that these convenience foods are cheaper, but they're also more desirable for various reasons. They're more convenient, they're shelf-stable, they taste good, they're advertised, they seem to be attractive. And so I think there is a need to work on all sides, right? So you have to work on the supply side and increasing production of safe and affordable foods, especially fruits and vegetables. And so improving the seeds, they're making them more climate resilient and adapting them to different contexts, increasing production, intensifying production in some cases, making supply increase in that way, working on supply chains, shortening supply chains in some cases so that there's a decrease in the losses, improving processing so that you can make make vegetables and fruits available year round where maybe they're not right now. And so I think it's going to take these concerted efforts all along the system and to address all of those different barriers. And so without increasing availability through production and decreasing losses, while also working on the desirability piece and the food environments that people are exposed to, we're not going to see much progress. So I think if we can make kind of simultaneous investments across all of those pieces of the puzzle, I think that we can start to move the needle on affordability and then what people are actually choosing to eat. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Deanna. Another question we have from the audience. This is a good one. How are nutrition and resilience interlinked? Now, this goes back to what we were hearing earlier. I think Joel Spicer from Nutrition International was making the point that good nutrition has other positive outcomes, improving health, improving education, improving the economy, improving productivity. So clearly, good nutrition is going to help the resilience of a people, of a country. Vivi, would you like to comment on why nutrition is the foundation of a resilient society?
I want to give two perspectives in regard to the social protection paradigm. We are talking about how to mitigate as well as adapt with any shocks, and also how to improve the resilience. In the first, related to the shock, we are talking about interrelated system, starting from the database about the targeting. So build a comprehensive database is important, not only for the poor, but also the vulnerable. The vulnerable here, usually up until around 60 to 70%, because if economy okay, everybody is okay, but in any shocks, the vulnerable could become poor at any time. So building a good database is one key. And then the second is about having a good study or analysis on the adequacy. Could be the affordability of the food as well as the adequacy of how to protect as well as how to compensate due to the shocks to get or to sustain a better or quality of life. So having a modality of coordination, that's one way to have a proper adequacy, and also the distribution. We are talking about electronic or through post office, particularly when we have to deal with the remote places and many other modes that could deploy at any time during the crisis. On one more thing on the evaluations. Evaluation guide us how to improve the program as well as its effectivity to the poverty, to the nutrition, and many other aspects that we want to have. The second part is on the resilience. I want to back to your point about the importance of the gender or the role of the women. Many studies shows that when we are talking about the transfer, if it goes to the men, it will go to many other things that out of the family needs. Could be the cigarettes or cell phone pulse and many others. So that's help us. I mean, the result of the study help us that if we want to talk about transfer, it needs to go to the women because it will bring closer to the effectiveness on the family values, including the nutrition. The second point on the resilience is keep build the capacity of the women. During the crisis, during the COVID, we learned the importance to have an urban farming or also bring food diversifications. Those are the things that usually in poor, they don't have such a good informations how to diversify of their routine in their diets as well as the sources. So keep build the venue of informations to the women, to all women is also important to bring the resilience of not only the family but also the quality, particularly in the nutrition. Thank you.
I think you've summed up one of the key messages of this session. Give more resources to women. That has to be our motto, right? Because that is clearly going to lead to better outcomes for everybody. And we've got time for one last question from the audience. This is about the issue of anemia. Increasing anemia is a matter of concern for several countries, such as India. However, social protection programs have no or very little impact. So what can be done to address that public health priority? Now, Diana, I know you were talking about anemia, and I think the figures were quite ambiguous, weren't they, on how well we could reduce anemia?
Yeah, no, I think so far it's not really clear. I think for cash programs, there's some evidence that they can reduce anemia among women, but none of the studies that looked at the effects on children found positive effects. In-kind transfers had a little bit more success, probably due to the fortified foods that were provided as part of the transfers. But I think to use social protection programs to address anemia will involve using fortified products, whether they're fortified flours or fortified special supplements for children or women, like lipid-based nutrient supplements or micronutrient powders. But they need to be more closely targeted. Or creating food baskets that include, high iron, good sources of iron, such as red meat or other things. And so I think, you can use social protection to address anemia, but the programs have to be designed to do that. Just transferring cash isn't going to do it, and especially not for children whose requirements for some of the nutrients that are needed to reduce anemia are quite high. And so just the normal diet isn't going to meet those needs. And then anemia is also caused by other problems such as malaria and other diseases. And so, you have to kind of understand what the context specific causes of anemia are and then design the programs to address those specific issues.
Brilliant. I know I said that was the last question, but I do actually want to ask a very quick one to you, Dr. Furman. This is a follow-up question to on your presentation about cash transfer or conditional cash transfer to improve nutrition. Not all conditional cash transfers programs have had good impact. So what is the key success factor for that program in Asia and the Pacific? If you can give us a brief comment on that.
It's because of I think the close monitoring of the compliance with those two objectives, staying in school and then having this prenatal and postnatal checkup for women. And as I said, I forgot to mention that the cash is given upon compliance with either of those two conditionalities. That's the reason why it's called conditional cash transfer. You have to comply, you have to make sure that the kids are in school, and that is closely monitored by authorities We even elect a parent leader to be able to do that, compliance, to monitor compliance, and then the health checkup of the mother and the infants. There's also a monitoring system that has been built, and partly it was said by my co-presenters, the monitoring, the strict monitoring, and then the evaluation, which should be done on a regular periodic basis. In the conditional cash transfer that we have done evaluation every 3 years. So it's a very, very rigorous kind of evaluation, looking at the impact and the results, the weaknesses that we need to plug, and the strengths that we can upscale in terms of future implementation of the project. That is very critical, the evaluation and the robust data that we build through the evaluation system. And that justifies, by the way, the budget that we will be asking from our Congress. Because there are also critics of the program. It says that it's a dole-out, but the evaluation provides us with the ammunition to argue that this is the best way to address poverty and malnutrition. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that response. And thank you to all our panelists for answering those questions from the audience. I want to say a big thank you to the audience for their thought-provoking questions. And of course, hearing the insights and expertise from our speakers on that. So we're now going to hear closing remarks on behalf of the Asian Development Bank and Nutrition International from Dr. Xingfeng Zhang, the Chief of Rural Development and Food Security Thematic Group at the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Zhang leads the formulation of the bank's strategy and knowledge in agriculture, natural resources and food, and oversees the implementation of the bank's vision in regional and country programs. Dr. Zhang, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, colleagues and guests around the world. On behalf of the Asian Development Bank and Nutrition International, our co-hosts of this event, I would like to thank all speakers and the panelists, of course, our moderator, for their great efforts and also sharing their knowledge and also insightful presentations. Our discussions today is so rich. It's quite hard for me to summarize one of the useful discussions today, but I would like to highlight 3 key points I think is very important from our discussions. Number 1 is Asian Pacific now is struggling with the multiple burdens of the malnutrition, which is a coincidence of the undernutrition, starting with the wasting, or the micronutrient deficiency, along overweight, or the obesity. All the countries in the region are suffering from at least 1 or more forms of malnutrition. Today's discussions not only just help us understand more on the issues or the root causes, but also help us and also provided some leads to identify the multi-sector pathways for the high impact nutrition interventions. We also agree there is urgent need for the rapid and effective actions, as well as the medium and also long-term coherent and coordinated measures. I believe one of our suggestions today will complement the discussions in the upcoming Nutrition for Growth Summit, which is going to be held December 7 to 8. And of course, ADB, we're going to have this Rural Development Food Security Forum early next year. This type of the findings from today is also going to be very helpful for us. This is number 1. Number 2, as a number of the panelists, particularly from the Mongolia panelists, say the pandemic recovery is a really opportunity and also the wake-up call to adopt the multiple sector approach, addressing the nutrition security. We agree to introduce integrated solutions across the sectors to address challenges such as protecting the poor households that face the economic shocks for falling into the malnutrition trap, particularly because of the pandemic. Number 2, because it's starting, we need to also have our program target to reduce the child malnutrition. Lastly, is also to promote the affordable dietary diversity in the future as well. This is number 2. Number 3, and this is side event, we also highlight importance of the holistic approach. I think this is the area that our Nutrition International champion for many of the years. But at the same time, we also need to compare with the long-term nutrition sensitive production. Protective measures such as providing assistance to marginal households with the more comprehensive and inclusive focus very critical to prevent the nutritional risk in the short run. But at the same time, we also need to invest in the long-term agricultural productivity enhancement, structural poverty reduction, and also the human capital development, especially to improve the nutrition literacy and the practices. Again, the problem nutrition insecurity in the region is enormous. We need to work together in coordination to avoid any duplication of the efforts, but at the same time also make the best use of our available knowledge and financial resources. Working together is a force multiplier to address this challenge meaningfully. Our cooperation with the Nutrition International is a good example for this type of the partnership. Nutrition International, as Joe just mentioned, has provided effective support to the national, sub-national governments to build the finance-ready multi-sector nutrition action plans, as well as assisting the number of the MDBs to build the nutrition smart investment portfolio already. I believe our cooperation will help us close this missed opportunities gap and also have a real impact for the people of the Asia and the Pacific region. So I hope we can continue this dialogue in cooperation with our think tank like the Nutrition International and also the other partners, and particularly our DMCs like the Philippines, Indonesia, Mongolia, and of course, the think tank the IPRI, through the various means, including a number of the webinars like today, come up this month or beyond. Once again, I want to thank all the speakers, panelists, moderators, and also the participants to make this webinar successful. Thank you and stay safe. Over to you, Chair.
Dr. Xingfeng, thank you very much indeed for that. And I too want to add my thanks to all of our speakers today. So the question has been posed, why focus on nutrition? There are so many things that need fixing in the world right now. Why nutrition? And I think our discussion today has really answered that question, because 1 in 3 people in the world suffer from malnutrition, and it places a burden not just on the individual, but on the family, the community, the government, ultimately the future of that country. As Dr. Xingfeng has said, the pandemic is a wake-up call. We can build a better future. Nutrition is one of the most important places to start. But to do that, we need to bring together different partners, different actors, because multi-sectoral involvement from key stakeholders is critical to success. I especially want to congratulate Nutrition International and the Asian Development Bank for coming together in a partnership which has been described as a game changer in tackling those challenges to aid nutrition development programs in Asia and the Pacific and champion the no missed opportunities approach so that we can integrate nutrition into social safety nets and social protection programs. I want to offer a vote of thanks to those of you who joined the conversation from all over the world, from many different time zones. We greatly appreciate your commitment to a world without hunger. And of course, a special thanks again to our speakers. Hearing your strategies and your policies has been very enlightening, and we really look forward to seeing how that commitment and expertise translates into progress on the ground. Just a couple of notes for everybody. You can access all the presentations and summaries of the speeches in the resources section on the left side of the platform. A recording of this presentation will be available for up to 48 hours after the event. That's via the same link that you joined the webinar. The platform will remain up for the next 30 days. You can come back, revisit anytime. You can send the link to other people if you think they might be interested. And after that, the video will be archived on Nutrition International and ADB's YouTube channel, and also on, let me give you this website, it's www.events.development.asia. All of that stuff will be available online. Thank you to the organisers of the event for this timely and relevant discussion. That brings this session to a close. A big thank you from me. Have a very good rest of the day.